So this is 10 minutes to 8 o'clock in the morning, GMT, on Wednesday, the 19th of July, 2023. What I'm looking at is the Dirty Digger Murdoch-ed Times newspaper in London, pages 18 and 19. There is a double page spread on the Times. I admire your resolve, Margaret Thatcher told Blair. So this is the one that we have been effectively predicting. Well, this is a confirmation, factual confirmation by the forces that control power and government in the United Kingdom. We have been calling KEIR STARMER the political murderer of the Labour Party. Now today, for the first time, there is this admission by the Murdoch Times that Tony Blair is, of course, a conservative. He was not Labour. So anyone who is getting excited about the alleged prospect overdriven by the agenda pushers for the Conservatives that Starmer would be the Labour fronter must stop immediately. Starmer has never been Labour fronter. Starmer has never been Labour Party supporter. Starmer is a liar and is an agent of everything that KEIR Hardy and others who founded the Labour Party more than 100 years ago, let's say, wanted to abolish. So this one, I admire your resolve, Margaret Thatcher told Blair. Now, that bold heading is followed underneath with a picture of Blair smiling as he shakes the hand of the witch. And Tony Blair said that the Italian fascist, Berlusconi, was an ally. And so now let's take a look at this particular handwritten thing that the Times is running. This is a handwritten thing dated the 4th of April, 2002. Letter shows how a friendship between two prime ministers crossed the political divide, Valentine Law writes. Now, of course, there was no political divide, you liar. Asked what had been her greatest achievement, Margaret Thatcher once replied, Tony Blair and New Labour. Amazing, isn't it? We did not rely on that. We relied on the evidence of what he has been doing, that is Starmer, before we describe him, or before we decided to describe him, the political murderer of the Labour Party. That's effectively what it comes from. And the caption here to the picture is that Blair and Thatcher at the Falklands War commemoration in 2007. And the caption continues, she praised him for ensuring Britain was a staunch defender of liberty. In letter from April 2002. Now, what precisely does Valentine, the idiot law mean by that? Of course, liberty is what they murdered. Liberty is what Margaret Thatcher murdered, and liberty is what Tony Blair murdered, and liberty is what STARMER is murdering. So that there would be a kind of liver demise. That is not what will happen. It is the change of faces. The change of faces is having to take place because the inevitable need to continue to hoodwink and mislead the ordinary people into thinking that they are getting into a new regime, a new culture. They are not. Now, as I said yesterday, Tony Blair's son is almost a billionaire. I mean, this is something that needs to be reported. How did he become a billionaire? What are the roots? What are the actual stages that Tony Blair's son apparently has taken to become the billionaire that he is? Now, about liberty, let's say that Falklands itself is contrary to the idea of liberty because what is Falklands? It's nothing to do with Britain. It's the Malvinas Island, and this belongs to the nearest land country, which is Argentina. Okay, so that's number one. Number two is the entirety of the project that Blair ran with George W. Bush was to crush liberty. Was to crush liberty, was to crush campaigners for liberty. And if you look at the silence in the last, let's say, 2 years, let's just say 2 years, silence on the part of Yvette Cooper, who is supposed to be the shadow Home Secretary, that is the Interior Minister. I mean, what does her silence represent? It represents Yvette Cooper's complicity with the agenda of the Conservatives, especially the agenda being driven by the fascistic far right operation done by the Home Office. Curtailing liberty at home, freedom of speech at home, protests at home. When the London Metropolitan Police crushed the mainly women demonstrators demonstrating peacefully in honor of Sarah Everard, the picture that came across and the picture that went round the world of the police, Metropolitan Police, crushing peaceful protesters was the picture of the white woman. She is not even African or Asian. The white woman, Patsy Stevenson. That is crushing liberty at the very actually core. Sarah Everard was a blonde white woman who was kidnapped by the London Metropolitan Policeman, who kidnapped her, and whatever length of time he kept her captive, prisoner, Then she abused her in any number of ways that we don't know. Then he raped her, and then he murdered her, and then he burnt her body. What other criminal has done that to a white young blonde woman in the last 100 years or 200 years in London? Being a active policeman, there is no record. So if Thatcher was praising 21 years ago that Blair was crushing liberty, and then labeling that crushing of the liberty as staunchly defending liberty, then of course she was lying. It's not our word, it's her word. And it's the Times corruptly appearing to be reporting the truth. Now, of course, I can't even read the handwritten thing that they have printed here from April 2002. Thatcher sent the handwritten congratulations to her successor, Tony Blair. New Labour was her biggest achievement. You don't need any decoration. You don't need any extra to that. And the picture that the Guardian, I think, has published of the criminal Tony Blair and of KEIR STARMER also tells the same story. So let's go back to the issue of Jeremy Corbyn. First of all, I have seen no evidence, and this is now, I'm talking about 41 years. 41 years since Jeremy Corbyn personally stated a praise of me because I spoke before him at a public event in Whitechapel, and he said, I wish I could speak like you, or words to that effect. So I have known Jeremy Corbyn for 41 years from a distance, but I have known him for 41 years. Let's say starting from that occasion, 1982. And I have observed Corbyn for more years when he was just an ordinary member of parliament. Then he was in post as the leader of the Labour Party. And combining all the observations, I can say that Corbyn lacked the key quality of leadership. And also, Corbyn lacked the key quality of moral independence from the cliques represented by the various vested interests, the corrupt trade union bureaucracies, and that anyone who professed any adherence to so called left ideology and at the same time put that as part of their solidarity with the leadership of the Labour Party as represented by Corbyn being in post. There were people of that description, but no one came across in their published or publicly accessible positions, analysis, roles, observations, insights that summed up a comprehensive alternative to the criminals called the conservatives and the big business coalition, which is permanent. So I have said this in short before I go back to the defense of the criminals fronted by Starmer attacking Corbyn's leadership. They don't attack Corbyn because of his name or his origin or whatever. They attack Corbyn as they would attack anybody else who would oppose the conservatives, the big business, the imperialists, and the violators of the Palestinians, for example, and the racists. That is the reality. So how long have we been on this broadcast? 16 minutes. 16 and a half minutes later. So what we shall be doing next is looking at a bit of the words that they're using. Tony Blair as the political inheritor of Margaret Thatcher, and we shall then bring it back to the discussion about Starmer versus Corbyn. Now, the Times on page 18 says News Archives, Valentine Law, writing this paragraph. Let's say, asked what had been her greatest achievement, Margaret Thatcher once replied, Tony Blair and New Labour. And if you look at the picture of Blair, I mean, the facial expression in that picture of evil, mass murderer, genocidist, murderer of innocent Muslims, Tony Blair looks most excited, as if he had actually met his role model. The second paragraph in Valentine Law's write-up is the further evidence of Thatcher's admiration for the former Labour Prime Minister. He says Labour. Fuck off. The former Prime Minister has now emerged in a handwritten letter in which Thatcher praised Blair's resolve after the 9/11 attacks. Now those things are made up, aren't they? Her letter, written in April 2002, that's dated the 4th of April, was in response to a kind and thoughtful letter from Blair. Thatcher wrote, "You will have found, as I did, that just as one international crisis subsides, another soon threatens. I greatly admire the resolve you are showing. You have ensured that Britain is known as a staunch defender of liberty and as a loyal ally of America. That is the very best reputation those three words underlined our country can have." The letter was included in the latest release of confidential information, confidential government papers from the National Archives in Kew. Blair, who went on to be heavily criticized for his decision to support President George W. Bush in the invasion of Iraq in 2003, has previously spoken of how Thatcher was immensely kind to him. He said, I always thought my job was to build on some of the things she had done rather than reverse them. Many of the things she said, even though they pained people like me on the left, him had a certain credibility. Now I'll read that again because the word credibility is not there. I misread that word, which is creditability. Many of the things she said, even though they pained people like me on the left, fuck off, you liar, had a certain creditability. Another admirer of Blair's response to the crisis was the former Liberal Democrat leader, Paddy Arsole, who emailed to say, Heavens, what a wonderful speech, just what the country needed. It will have daunted your enemies, thrilled your friends, and comforted those who doubt. Now, Petty Arsehole was a complete, absolute fucking liar, and he was writing to another liar. The newly released files also reveal how Belair was reluctant in the days after 9/11 to undermine the coalition formed after the attacks by rushing to invade Iraq. Belair's chief of staff, Jonathan Powell, wrote in a memo that in a discussion with the conservative leader Ian Duncan Smith about anthrax attacks in the US, Blair said it was unclear whether the anthrax had been made in Iraq. Powell wrote after the meeting on October 17th, we had to be careful about throwing around allegations. He, Belair, would not be opposed to dealing with Saddam Hussein in the courts, but we would not undermine the coalition by rushing into taking on Iraq now. The Muslim world was very fragile, and we could probably lose France and Germany as well. The files also reveal that Sir John Stanley, a former Conservative minister, wrote to Blair 5 days after 9/11, saying that the government should assume there would be a terrorist attack on one or more British cities using weapons of mass destruction in the near and foreseeable future. Stanley, a former armed forces minister, wrote, I don't need to tell you that if terrorist organizations succeed in using nuclear, chemical, or biological weapons of mass destructions in urban areas, the number of deaths, the length of time it will take, huge numbers of people to die, the degree of excruciating pain suffered by the victims will all be vastly greater than anything we have witnessed in New York or Washington this week. Now, these are the war criminals, all of them, the whole piece in the Times or the package in the Times is designed to please and encourage warmongers, mass murderers, genocides, racists, and criminals for war. Nothing in the Times, nothing in the Times, or indeed in the Guardian, for that matter, in the last, let's say, 20 years, since these items that are being discussed in the Times today happened, they have not. The Times has not, the Guardian has not talked about the sheer criminality, the sheer violations of human rights in the wars. Even after all the evidence of the lies that they told about Iraq and about Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction, all the lies that they perpetrated have been exposed as lies. And yet collectively, the Guardian hasn't done what it should have done. Put in one editorial all the evidence in a summary and support the prosecution trial of the war criminal Tony Blair. It hasn't done that. Nor has anyone, any member of the Labour Party card-carrying members of parliament done that. Now we take a kind of short break from that particular aspect of Tony Blair's criminality, and we visit Tower Hamlets, where Tony Blair allowed the criminal John Prescott, who was in post as the local government environmental kind of minister at the time, which the DEFRA and the local government briefs have been changed since that time, but it was John Prescott who was in post. And what Prescott did, let's say between 2004 and 2006, let's say, I'll check the actual dates shortly, but that is the main period of time when they were acting. And what they wanted to do was to smash the council housing stock in Tower Hamlets that belonged to the public, the people of Tower Hamlets, and was kind of legally under the control of the local Tower Hamlets council. And they forced the Tower Hamlets council to hand over the majority of the housing stock to the gang of criminals called Haque. So it's not like Tony Blair was not operating in relation to Tower Hamlets as he would operate, or he did operate, in relation to hundreds of other councils across England. Tower Hamlets was the target of destruction as part of society or as a social platform, because as one of the recognized most deprived, poverty-stricken populations, Tower Hamlets needed the opposite of what Tony Blair and John Prescott were doing to it. They were snatching the last substantial resources from the control of Tower Hamlets Council. Just like Margaret Thatcher, Tony Blair's role model, had snatched the milk from the children. So here is a description of Poplar Harka, which says the Wikipedia entry on Poplar Harka says it's a company, it's a charity housing association. And under industry, it says it's a social housing. And it says it was founded on the 13th of September 1996. And it says 26 years ago. And it says the founder is Steve Stride. And it says that Poplar Harka served the East London area. And it says services, housing, community regeneration. So net income is 10 million and the revenue is 54 million according to this entry and dating the figure in 2016. And it says the history of the Harka is that it was set up by the London Borough of Tower Hamlets to regenerate the area, especially certain council estates whose residents voted to transfer to the new body. Now, this is a lie because no residents voted for the handing over of the council housing stock to a gangster created organization. All the residents were misrepresented and were misinformed and were misled into coming across as if they were voting for transfer to Poplar Harka. Now, I am on the record, not once, not twice, but I'm on the record for more than 25 years. In the context of Poplar Harka, I am the critic, factually, evidentially, of the corruption that is Tower Hamlets Council. Tower Hamlets Council has been a corrupt council right from the beginning of the merger of Bethnal Green, Poplar, and Stepney councils that became Tower Hamlets Council in April 1965. I've been a critic, the definitive critic of Tower Hamlets Council's corrupt role and existence because the movement defending the community in the East End of London, I set up the movement defending the community in the East End of London on the 13th of June 1963. 2 years and 2 months before the Tower Hamlets Council emerged after the merger of the three borough councils, Stepney, Bethnal Green, and Poplar. I founded the movement defending the community in the East End of London some years before I arrived in the United Kingdom. The reason I formed the movement defending the community in the East End of London was because of my connection or connections with so many people in East London. I was in regular contact with these people every week. So I gave the definition to the idea of the really multicultural East London before I arrived here 51 years ago. And I knew that the formation of the Popular Harka, with the encouragement of Tony Blair's regime, was in order to destroy the defense that had been built up by various people working to defend the community in the east end of London, especially since the defiant stand taken by the popular councillors in 1921. But when I looked around what the Popular Harka was doing, remember I was right at the very center of the defense of the community against the Crossrail hole at that very time. So when I looked at the various elected holders of council posts, like councillors, there was nobody. And I say this again, there was no councillor on Tower Hamlets Council at any time in 2000, let's say 3 onwards, or before that, that even used the phrase of the community. And I shall come to that in the essay form that we are now starting to diagnose Popular Harka and what the latest information is, which is that, as I predicted, the criminals confected the other criminal outfit, THCH. And the criminals confected THCH is now going to be merged with Popular Harka. Now, I predicted that for a long time. And when I attempted to get the Tower Hamlets Council to answer questions about the housing stock transfer to THCH in particular, in my presentation of the question to the so-called full council on the 26th of June 2013, that is 10 years and a month ago, when I tried to do that, the whole meeting was suspended. The meeting was suspended by the racist liar criminal chairing the meeting, Leslie Pavitt. She was a crook, lying racist crook. She suspended the meeting of the 26th of June 2013 right at the middle of my question, under the pretext that somebody, a dubious individual called John Wright, was taking pictures of the meeting. But her real reason, Leslie Pavitt, the criminal, was to interrupt me from asking an effective question about the role of Tower Hamlets Council itself in defending the council housing stock and defending the tenure of people who were already in council housing accommodations. Leslie Pavitt was a liar. So was Rabina Khan. Rabina Khan was on her feet at the time, allegedly answering my question, but she was lying. And I said it's on the record again. Rabina Khan is a liar. And Rabina Khan doesn't know the facts that she appears to be spewing about. And there is no other councillor that could be identified with the cabal that was fronted by Lutfur Rahman on that date, 2013, 26th of June 2013, who had the morality, the knowledge, or the courage, or the concern for the community to support me. When my question was interrupted by Leslie Pabbitt, racistly, criminally abusing her position and suspending that meeting, no matter how short that suspension was, the resumed proceedings of the meeting did not allow my question to be effectively continued. So, as I said, because of the length it will take to cover all the aspects of these, we shall be continuing in other parts later about the destruction of the council housing stock and the theft of the council housing stock by Poplar Harka and THCH. Now, in the THCH, from the very beginning, let's say from the 2006 onwards, was in post as the chief executive, a criminal racist liar called Mike Tyrrell. The terrible Mike Tyrrell was later given a sack because many of the corruption he had been allowed to perpetrate during the years that he was in post were belatedly caught about 7-8 years ago, and he was given the sack. But it appears in the last year, the finance of the Tower Hamlets community housing has completely collapsed. It was never sound, but it has collapsed completely. And this is the pretext, the excuse being used to allow the housing stock that is nominally now in the THCH control to be swallowed up by Poplar Harka. So we shall be talking about all of those and spelling out the multi-billion pound losses that they've inflicted on the community generally, and the multi-billion pound losses that they've inflicted on the work that the Khoodeelaar campaign has been doing, the work that I have been originating and creating. So in 2006, let's say, there were two fundamental attacks. One was the Crossrail Hole plot, and the other was the transfer of housing stock to Poplar Harka and the beginning of the transfer of the remaining housing stock to THCH. Who was the sitting member of parliament in 2006? From Bethnal Grove, it was George Galloway, and on the Poplar and Limehouse side, it was, of course, the criminal Jim Fitzpatrick. Now, Fitzpatrick was a colluder, complicit with the crooks of Poplar Harka. So it could not be practically, realistically expected that Fitzpatrick would raise any objection against the transfer of housing stock to Poplar. As far as George Git Galloway is concerned, Git Galloway was a stranger to Tower Hamlets, number one. And number two is that Git Galloway was too involved in too many personal adventures, all aimed to benefit George Galloway. So Galloway never got the chance to focus energy and attention, even for 1 year, on defending the community's housing stock or the community's environment, as happened, as was threatened by the Crossrail Hole attack on Brick Lane. So we shall be talking in detail about how total was George Galloway's dishonesty and lack of engagement. And as a consequence of George Galloway being dishonest, the price had been paid and is continued to be paid by the people in the borough, ordinary people. The damage caused by Jim Fitzpatrick is equally horrendous. Now, the replacements of George Galloway in Bethnal Green and Bow by Roshnara Ali and the appearance of Afsana Begum in place of Jim Fitzpatrick has not improved things for the community. Roshnara Ali is a liar, and so is Afsana Begum. We shall be talking about all of these chapter and verse in due course in later editions. Shall be ending this one at just over 47 minutes at 08:38 hours GMT on Wednesday, the 19th of July 2023.